Well, good afternoon, everyone. Early afternoon, early evening, whatever this might be. It's kind of that weird time of day. But welcome to the Forum, a weekly program of the Columbus Metropolitan Club where we cultivate the conversations and connections that drive Columbus forward. The Forum brings together visionary leaders, CEOs, members of Congress, college presidents, UN ambassadors, artists, and changemakers, sometimes scrubs like me as well, to examine issues that matter, exchange diverse perspectives, and forge connections that create a better Columbus. It is so good to have you with us on this 4 o'clock beautiful day in September. I'm Matt Barnes, morning co-anchor of NBC4 Columbus, and a proud member of the CMC Board of Trustees. And for those of you joining us by live stream, welcome as well. We're coming to you from the beautiful National Veterans Memorial and Museum right here in downtown Columbus. I want to thank the sponsor of today's forum, Downtown Columbus Incorporated. Additionally, we'd like to thank DCI for providing this evening's complimentary parking, which I know we all enjoy. Thank you as well to the presenting sponsor of our, give them a round, yeah. I won't ever not clap for parking, free parking. But thank you also to the presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch. We're also, of course, grateful to the National Veterans Memorial and Museum for this wonderful space and for hosting us. So let's thank everyone for helping make this day possible. Really looking forward to this forum because civic engagement is the backbone of democracy. But in this era of polarization, and obviously this past week has reminded us of that, no single sector will strengthen it alone. So today's forward-looking conversation brings together cross-sector leaders who are forging partnerships that make civic life stronger. So please help me welcome today's panelists. The man better known as Dr. B, but his official name is Dr. Frederic Bertley, the president and CEO of COSI and interim CEO of the National Veterans Memorial and Museum. Megan Cummings, the president and CEO of Philanthropy, Ohio. Sandy Doyle Ahern, president of EMH&T. And our host, Sophia Pfiffner, president and CEO of your Columbus Metropolitan Club. We look forward to today's conversation. Sophia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So naturally, if anyone knows me, I am very excited about today's conversation around civic engagement and participation. One of my favorite quotes connected to this issue is by Alexis de Tocqueville, who wrote that Americans of all ages, all conditions, and all dispositions constantly form associations. And I share that quote because when people think of the United States and how we engage in public life, oftentimes, it's because we gather. We come to CMC events. We have book clubs. We support cultural institutions. We encourage our employees to give back. We set up community foundations where we place our philanthropic donations. It is part of the American fabric and spirit. You know, for nearly 250 years, we've had these types of partnerships and associations and gatherings across business, philanthropy, and education, all to strengthen the civic fabric of our communities. So before we dive into some of the issues and opportunities, I wanted to just set the table and understand, how do you define civic engagement? And perhaps we'll start with you, Dr. B.
Sophia, thank you very much for that question, and thank you, CMC, for being here. It's such an important conversation. I want to begin by saying how fitting it is that we're having this conversation in this very building. You see, this is the National Veterans Memorial and Museum. And the reason why we have that Congress-designated national title is because our very own Senator John Glenn did this, created this, founded this as one of his last acts. And I highlight the great senator because while he was one of the most amazing human beings, most amazing Americans, he was a phenomenal military pilot. He, of course, was the first human being to circumvent our planet safely, by the way, on the mathematics calculated by none other than an amazing African-American mathematician, right? So if you've ever seen the movie Hidden Figures, she supported John Glenn's orbit. But then he dedicated his life to service through politics. And Senator Glenn's most impactful and engaging thought and practice was to ensure as best as possible that this great city, this great state, this great nation talked about and figured out civility. It is literally his greatest gift he gave to us. So when you ask me, someone who has the pleasure of working with the amazing team here at the National Veterans Memorial Museum that was founded by Senator John Glenn, he literally embodies why civility is important. And for me, as a definition, it's exactly resonant with what you said as an introduction. This is how we move forward, by conversation, discourse, disagreeing, but never being disagreeable. And now more than ever, we need to double down on the importance of civility and civics in the non-for-profit partnership space, as well as in the for-profit industry. So it is the cornerstone to what I think is a proper democracy and a healthy society, by understanding civics and practicing civility.
And Megan, can you share just a little bit about what you do? Because I think that it's really important and critical work across the state, and then also, how do you define civic engagement?
Yeah, sure. So I am with Philanthropy Ohio. I'm about 3 months on this job as the CEO, but I've been involved with the organization since 2014, and in nonprofits and philanthropy my whole professional life. And Philanthropy Ohio is a membership organization of foundations across our state. Community foundations, family, private foundations. We have about 170 members, and they come from all parts of our state, representing all different issues. And they're really getting up every day, figuring out how we can get resources in our community and make a difference on our most critical issues across the state. So thrilled to be with that organization formally, which is fantastic. So when I think of civic engagement, this has always been something that's just been so important. I was a political science major. I think some people are just wired to always look for how to be engaged with our communities. I think it's a way for us to participate and have agency in what happens with our communities. So whether it's by volunteering or going to a public meeting or just voting or raising your voice in some way about issues that are important to you, that's really how I think of civic engagement. And when those pains aren't heard, when they're not responded to, when you're crying out for a long time like, hey, things are not working here for me or my family or my neighbors or my employees, there is a frustration that comes with that. There's no outlet for those feelings. So when I think of civic engagement, especially in the time we've been going through, it's really recognizing that we all strive for really great communities where people are healthy and safe and have good jobs and can afford homes and all these things that unite us. And civic engagement, for me, is the way we make that opinion activated, either through voting or getting involved in our community or just having a say in what happens around us. So I see every day our members across the state putting the resources in and the programs in place for this to happen in really intentional ways in communities across Ohio, and I think it's critically important.
Thank you. And Sandy?
Thank you, everybody, for being here today. This is civic engagement. You did not need to be here today, but you are because you chose to be. So I think it's actually super simple. It's caring enough to show up for something and being fortunate enough to recognize that we can do it. I think that's all it is.
Thank you so much. So we have civility. It's about a sense of agency and how you can show up and do something in your community. And I love all of those definitions of civic engagement, but I worry that oftentimes when the community simplifies what civic engagement can look like, it's oftentimes voting or volunteering, or we watch what's happened nationally with violence and free speech, and we go, well, geez, what's this country coming to? Does this even matter? Can I do anything about it? I'm curious to know, you all represent very different organizations. How do you think civic engagement and participation can solve some of the polarization that I think I can safely say every American with a beating heart, every person who is watching our country is consistently grappling with?
So I think it's a great question. Some of you know me, I'm pretty straightforward, so I'm just going to be straightforward. I'm not sure it can solve a polarization problem, but I also think you can't let a polarization problem get in the way of not doing it. Because at the end of the day, personally, I'm not involved in civic issues because I'm looking to die on some sword or looking for accolades. I'm doing it because there's people out there on those streets that are depending on people like me who have the great fortune to be able to do it. So I think you have to do it despite polarization, frankly, and then what you can hope comes from it is reasonable conversation that eventually moves us on. That's the only way I actually think it's going to happen, because you somehow got to get to the middle of people who care about lots of different issues and not let polarization lead you into those conversations. That's it for me.
I think everyone has a role in this, no matter their position, title, community, etc. And I think it comes down to recognizing humanity in the person sitting right next to you right now, or across from dinner, or at your kid's baseball game, or wherever that is, that person-to-person connection. So I think there's an entrance into for everyone into reducing the polarization and increasing this dialogue we need to have. I kind of look at it in 4 rings. So what do I have control of just personally? The people I talk to every day, how can I nurture those relationships and build that humanity across there? And then you go out to your peer groups and your kids' peer groups and those parents and, again, sports teams and your friends, and how are you nurturing it within that area? And then some of us have agency to be able to do that in our organizations. So what culture are we setting there? How are we modeling the way for civility and communication and relationships at our organizations? And then some people, especially folks in this room, you have influence at a systems level. You're at very large companies, you're in government, you're in large civic organizations. What responsibility can you take each day for moving those systems and laws that nurture that atmosphere of civility? So I think no matter where you are, you can engage in one of those levels or all 4 of those levels, and it's really important, whatever privilege you have and whatever access to those networks you have, you use it to model the way for the society we want to live in at this moment.
Absolutely.
And I'll just add, and you touched on it with influence. We model what we see. This is the greatest country in the world. But what do we celebrate? What do we identify as great? Successful CEO, successful athlete, amazing entertainer. We train our children to value certain things. In our school systems, in public school systems or private school systems, civility or civic engagement is not even part of the curriculum. You might get an after-school program in grade 7 and then grade 11 that has you doing something in the community, but it's not valued. What's valued is, can you throw a football 80 yards, or are you going to go to Ohio State and play as a quarterback? Or what's valued is, are you on a political track? And so if we want the current generation, especially the next generation, to act differently in terms of being civil with one another and then practicing civic engagement, we have to teach that, model that, not here and there as adults who are in our careers, but we got to teach our kids to do that, and we're just not doing that.
I think that all of you make really good points. One, around coming together, talking to peer groups or people who are like you, which I'd be remiss if I didn't invite everyone to participate in the big table with the Columbus Foundation on October 21st. So if you're online, feel free to register now. But you also mentioned, we're not valuing civic participation and civility. Oftentimes, you can tell what a community values based off of where they put their resources, their financial resources. And so I'd love to pivot a little bit and talk about money. Yay, right? Let's talk about where our investments are going. There's a new local committee here in Central Ohio, in Columbus specifically, that's reviewing funding for arts, human services, and tourism. And I'm curious, how do we position Columbus to find the right mix of funding to support some of the most critical issues that our community is facing when there's limited dollars? And I'm curious to know, perhaps, Megan, if you want to start from your perspective, how do you do that?
Yeah, so I'll just start with philanthropy that we see from our members. So these are foundations across the state. Together, they hold about $50 billion in assets right now. Good market days, even more. So philanthropy is just a part of it. And I think that sometimes when we are in critical issues that we need to solve, like affordable housing, like health-related issues, poverty alleviation, et cetera, sometimes we think that's like, oh, philanthropy, go do that. That's your job, to clean that up, which is a big part of what philanthropy does. That's important. But what I thought of for when you ask your question is how important it is to bring cross-sector partners to the table. And philanthropy is just one of those. I spent 13 years at the Greater Cincinnati Foundation, and it was so important. Our grants could only go so far, but our convening could go even further than our money, and bringing corporate partners to the table, having P&G at the table, that's a really important partner. Having our local and state government at the table, that's really important. And each one of those sectors brings distinct resources to the table. Some money, some business acumen, some powers that reside in our government. And if we're trying to solve any problem without all of our resources at the table, we're crazy. We're leaving things behind. So, not being able to speak specifically to Columbus on this, I think anytime we have cross-sector partners at the table and figuring out how to pull all those levers of resources is really important. Some are money, some are influence, some are convening power, some are intangibles that just the chemistry that company or that government official brings to that table can move a project forward. And I think that is the best way we can problem solve in our communities.
Sandy?
So we're talking about the frack?
Yes.
All right. That's what I thought. Okay, so I'll just put it out there that I am the chair of the committee, and I think Marshall's here too. I saw you walk in here somewhere, and now he's probably going to run out. There he is. So what Sophia is referring to is the Funding Review Advisory Committee that is kind of breathed life into one that was done several years ago. Tom Katzenmeyer, others were involved in that, and thank you for that work. This is tough, okay? This is a group of people who are volunteers who have been asked by the mayor's office and city council and the county commissioners to come together and think about what we can do as a region to fill some significant gaps. Everybody knows a little bit about lots of things, and you all know in the sectors you spend some time in that you'd probably say there's funding challenges. So when you add all those up, there's funding challenges across just about every sector you can possibly think of. I'd expand the answer for us to say we are talking about the region. So we're not just talking about the city of Columbus. I don't think that's appropriate to think that the city of Columbus is responsible for fixing all these challenges, but we are looking regionally and we are looking at private sector participation. The reality is, and I'm just going to say it plainly, the need is substantially higher than the potential resources that we could even dream up, number one. Number two, there's limitations on resources in terms of how you enact those, because anything we do will impact somebody. So while we might suggest something that's going to potentially raise funds for this particular need, that's also money out of that person's pocket. And so balancing those is really tricky. However, I give a lot of credit to our government partners for this, because at the end of the day, we're going to make recommendations. I already accepted the chair knowing I'm going to piss everybody off. It's fine. I got it. You're not going to make everybody happy, but I'm not the one who has to actually implement it. And so I do think it's important to recognize that we have government leaders right now who are trying to think beyond the normal day-to-day solutions to ask volunteers to think about how we might do this. I personally think that once that's done, we've got to get back to the bigger conversation, which is not just that this is going to solve the world's problems, but we have to continue to build a culture in Columbus of philanthropy. And I mean in your home, I mean in our businesses. And I'm not saying that you have a ton of money to give away. Philanthropy can come in a lot of different ways. The biggest thing that drives me crazy, the lottery. If I walk up to somebody and I say, would you be willing to give $1 for homelessness? No. The lottery I'm gonna go buy a ticket on the chance I have a 1 in a billion opportunity to win. It's fascinating, it's a mindset. And so there's nothing wrong with buying that lottery ticket. The bigger question is, why are you not willing to give up that same dollar? So I think we have to build a culture of philanthropy in our families, our institutions, and frankly, at the business community. It's got to stay at that level as well.
Absolutely. Oftentimes when we think about civil society, it includes the private sector, government, and nonprofits all working together. But when we hear that as individuals, we start to think, oh, it's that institution's responsibility. It's City Hall's responsibility behind us here. It's COSI's responsibility or the National Veterans Memorial Museum, when really each of us individually have a responsibility to shape the community that we want to see. With that, with cross-sector collaboration, there's also some surprising opportunities. And I'm curious if any of you have any stories that you might like to share around partners that you've made in this work that have really surprised you. And Dr. B, you have a lot of stories, so I feel like you have something good to say.
Sure. Thank you for that. And to piggyback off of my colleagues to my left, so ditto, and to your point about values, there are things, we talk about nice versus necessary. Homelessness, you got to find shelter for people. That's necessary. Health, right? Necessary. Education, necessary. You can layer on these things. Workforce development, so people are trained to get a job to feed their families, necessary. Then you throw in, hey, I'm writing a grant for civic responsibility engagement. People are like, that's a nice to have. Oh, that's cute if you do that. Now, doing that right will actually help the other sectors, but a lot of times it's not seen like that. And so to your point about funding, it's really hard. In terms of example partnerships, I'll just use one example. Across the street at COSI in 2019, we launched something called the Science Festival. COSI Science Festival. And many of our big funders are sitting here right in the room, I'm looking at them. But to pull this off, it's a 4-day event. First Wednesday in May through Saturday. Wednesday through Friday, we do 110 different events in Franklin County and contiguous counties. COSI can't put off, we don't have the staffing capacity or the money or the bandwidth to pull off 110 different events, but we do that through partnership. We have over 200 partners. And then on the Saturday, we have something called the Big Science Celebration. That's the only event at COSI. It's not in the building, it's around the building, and we have 200 tents there, everything from higher eds to corporate America to big tech companies to non-for-profits. And so these are all partners who have agreed to, signed up, if you will, with us to say, hey, science literacy and science access is important. Doesn't mean everybody's gonna get a master's or undergrad master's or a PhD, but just like we need to learn to read and write, right? You might not be the next William Shakespeare or Maya Angelou, but you need to read and write. We're not expecting you to be the next great scientist, but you need to be science literate. But only through partnerships have we been able to activate that, and it's been absolutely amazing. So thank all of you in the room, because almost everybody in here partners with that. But that's how we're able to have a much broader impact. 110 different events in 3 days in this community.
That's tremendous. I have time for just one more question before we start the audience participation. So for those of you who are tuning in online, feel free to type in your questions for our panelists here. If you're in the room, feel free to gather behind Doug at the mic to ask a question. And before we go to that segment, I have a question about partnerships. We all talk about partnerships. I think it's a big, if you live in Columbus, if you do business here, the Columbus way, partnerships, cross-sector collaboration, those are really nice, lovely words. But how do you make it sustainable and effective? Because from every single one of your seats, I think that you have probably a very different ideal on what does it mean to have a good, sustainable partnership.
Sorry? So, there's a lot of questions about what the Columbus Way is. You hear people talk about it, criticize it, and that's completely fine. But let me tell you, it is the truth. The reason people don't always understand it is because partnerships don't always mean big, grand announcements. Sometimes they're really small things that happen behind the scenes, and they happen all the time in this town every single day. It's stunning. On the flip side, I would say the partnership activity that's occurred over the last several years that have led to some big announcements are game changers. For example, the one yesterday with Columbus State and Ohio State. That is not some fluffy thing that just happened. That was 15 years in the making. It took the right leadership group to do it. It took the right funding to do it. Shannon Hardin deserves a lot of credit for getting us as far as he did, because without the Columbus Promise, we wouldn't even be talking about then a partnership with Ohio State. So there's a lot more behind that scene, so I won't do all that right now because it would take a long time. But the point is, often what the public sees is the big splashy announcement. The work that it takes to get to that point, just by example, Link Us is another example, huge game changer for our region, comes because people like this in this room believe in it and never give up and just fight and fight and fight and fight and fight to make it happen. So you have to trust to some degree that the good people who live in this community are actually doing the partnership work that it takes to get things done, and know that not everything makes a headline, but it is happening here. And I think I have great confidence that it does not go on to the degree that it does here in other cities in this country, and we can never let that go, but it's culture. I teach the next person who teaches the next person, and that's on us right now to continue to do that.
So much of what you said resonates with me and with the organizations in philanthropy. And it's not that splashy thing that happens in the end. It is those dozens and dozens of meetings and the facilitation and the Post-it notes and the call before the meeting to make sure you have alignment when that bombshell issue comes up in the meeting. And it's the before the meeting, it's the after the meeting, it's the trust that's built, it's showing up for each other in community, it's dozens of trips, to the community center to listen to folks that are in the community. I think repeated, consistent interactions over many years builds the trust necessary to get big things done. And it's not sexy. It's just hard, gritty work that needs to be done. And I always think, if I'm a true partner to someone, I will never surprise them because they know what's coming, or we've talked about it. I will never catch a partner off guard. And they're not a true partner to me if I get caught off guard, like, oh my God, what was that? So that's kind of my litmus test to say, like, is this a true trusting partnership? And I think you can only build that through hundreds of consistent interactions that activate your intentions.
Anything to add?
Real quick, because our dear CEO to my right will not toot her own horn, but a few months ago, she spent a week at Harvard Business School as part of the YALP program, the Young American Leadership Program. 15 cities across the United States participate. They select 7 to 8 leaders in those communities, and they send them to Harvard Business School, and they spend a week doing a deep dive on all these amazing clinical case studies. Well, one of the case studies they do, and I know some of you know this in the room, but I want to make sure all of you know this. One of the case studies they teach at Harvard Business School doubles down on what you just heard here. The Columbus Partnership and the Columbus Way. Not that the Ohio State's not one of the greatest universities in the world, but so is Harvard Business School and Harvard in general. And they have realized that across America, one of the cities that does it the best is right here. So I thank you for underscoring what it takes to be true partners. And it takes the hard work. Things don't happen overnight. There's so many things that happen silently, but we should rejoice in the fact that we have an infrastructure and a framework in this city, unlike any other city out there, to really double down on making partnerships, small, medium, and large, splashy, and completely silent, actually happen to move our city forward.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. B. What I will share is that it takes individuals. That Columbus doesn't happen, Gahanna doesn't happen, Grove City doesn't happen without individuals who are curious, who want to show up, and who have agency to know how they can give back. So with that, I'd love to pass it back to Doug, because we have individuals who are showing up who have questions that we want to address.
Sophia, thank you very much, and thank you so much to today's panelists. If you have a question for today's panelists, please do join us here at the microphone. We'll try to get to as many of them as possible before we run out of time. If you're watching online, please type your question into the chat. We'll try to get to those too. Great questions at CMC always have a couple things in common, don't they? They can be asked in just a sentence or two. And what punctuation mark does a question end with? They end with a question mark. Yes, they do. Thank you very much. Brian, you're up.
Thanks, Doug. My name is Brian Urbanski with the Aubrey Affordable Housing Foundation, and we house some of the lowest income residents in the city of Columbus. We don't have a big advertising or marketing budget or PR budget. In fact, we have none at all. So civic engagement is very important to us. In addition to networking events like this, how do you recommend nonprofits like us and other nonprofits can get the word out and engage with our community to spread the word?
That was okay. Philanthropy person here. So a lot of my career was in nonprofit fundraising, often for very small organizations that probably are in the same situation as you, like we just don't have that budget. So a few things. I would find people that are passionate about your mission that can tell your story for you and with you around the community. The other thing I would really recommend is as you have those funders, sometimes, whether fair or not, sometimes funders are kind of that seal of approval that, give your work more credibility. And oftentimes they're willing to amplify your story too and, put you in touch with their donors, especially at, community foundations. So I would start there, but I think that influence piece is really big. I worked at an inner city drug treatment center in Cincinnati for part of my career, and very similar situation to you, and we would just amplify those stories of successful client outcomes and family outcomes, and then have them tell their stories as well. I think that's a start. I'd be happy to talk to you additionally too, though.
Yeah, and I'll just add that your question really underscores the potential and power of partnerships, which is what discussion is about, because your content and your cause is so important. You have for-profit companies that will do I'm sure you all know this, but I'll just say it. They have for-profit companies that will do pro bono work. So you can hitch yourself to and I don't know if someone's in here from Falcon Maritime or any of these other great, bigger companies that have a pro bono vertical where they'll say, we love your cause, we'll do your marketing, we'll do your communication, we'll push out your brand, your cause in a way that you could never achieve, per your point about our smaller budget sizes. So partnering, but specifically with an industry sector that's delivering on the thing you want.
Just add one more thing to that, sir. I would say that it's easy when we're delivering life-saving, life-changing services to think that is clearly the first priority for where our money goes. I think we would agree that's very, very important. But I would also challenge you as your agency grows is to carve out money for that, because that's a really important function. Can you imagine any company in this country saying, we don't need to market, we don't need to communicate, that's a way to grow. So, I think sometimes we have such a big heart for the mission, we just want every single dollar to go to that direct delivery of service. And what could be achieved if more people knew about our mission and it inspired more money to come to us so we could serve more people. So I think it's not just a concrete cost, but it's also an investment in the growth of your agency and your ability to attract even more attention and donors to your cause. So I would also think about it that way. I know those are hard trade-offs, though, when you're in the moment.
Excellent answers. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon. I'm Kathy Fox, a long time ago former president of CMC, and I want to first thank you. My question is about, in an environment that right now resources are shrinking, federal resources are shrinking, corporate resources to the civic sector have been shrinking for a long time. How do we make the pie bigger so that we don't lose the important things that need to happen? Not, of course, first, the things that are life-saving and critical, but we also have in this community a lot of great cultural and artistic resources that under some circumstances might lose out on funding. How do we make the pie bigger in this community?
I mean, that's the million-dollar question, right? Such an important question. How do you continue to do good work? How do you continue to make a difference when your catalytic agents, i.e. money, is shrinking? I don't have the answer. The way I've been thinking about it with my colleagues, a term that we do not like to use because it was painful when we went through it, is we almost have to have a pandemic mentality. Now, in the case of the pandemic, that was caused by a biological entity. It happened, and we're all affected. In this case, it's happening by humans, however the political sector is shifting, and they're making decisions that's impacting us. But if we can have that, I don't want to use the word scarcity model, because I do not like the scarcity model, but we just have to get super creative. And I know it's not a great solution to your very important question, but we have to act like it's real. The funding is going away. We have these programs and people that are changing the world, doing important things. What are alternative ways to figure this out. And that's where aggregate thought, Columbus partnership, leadership, all of you in the room, the more we put our brains together and partner in bigger ways, we can still move the needle in the right direction with monies slowly being diminished, knowing that unlike the pandemic, there will be an end to this at some point. I mean, pandemic ended too, we just didn't know when it would happen. I'm assuming the pendulum will swing at some point the other way. But that's the question. That's a painful but tough question.
It's so painful. And I think I see it as a ripple effect. So as I meet with foundations, their stress level is very high right now. They are getting more requests than ever before, and they weren't even able to fund them before. And now, it's just exponentially bigger, the number of requests that are coming through. And then if we think the stress that's being felt by foundations right now is high, when you go to the nonprofit direct service delivery nonprofits, it's tenfold, maybe 50-fold the stress. I think, of course, it's the money going away from a lot of the government streams they had, but it was the quickness that it happened. There wasn't a, hey, this is going to happen in 3 years, figure it out, or there was no runway to the cuts. I'm sure you've experienced it in places you've been too. It was just so immediate. We were getting calls, we won't be able to make payroll next Friday on this specific program that's government funded. It's just going away. So there was really no planning time. So I think that's creating a lot of the stress. What I see from our members now is, especially with the cuts coming to Medicaid and SNAP, we know there is going to be even greater demand on the nonprofit sector to provide programs. And I hate to say this, philanthropy cannot plug the hole. We don't have enough zeros in those assets to plug the hole. When I was introducing myself and talking about our members together have $50 billion in endowments. Okay, that's great. That's a really big number. The runtime on that compared to federal government or state or local government spending is like a few months, guys. It just doesn't plug the hole. So we're getting really creative. We're urging our members, how can they look at their spending policies since the market's been so good and most endowments have been up? Can we increase those spending limits now to get more money out in our communities? And we're trying to get creative too. And the hole is just too big to plug. So I think we're going to see some real shifts in our nonprofit community and our foundation community coming up as we figure out what the need, how we can help our neighbors in need that will be affected by these cuts.
Thank you. We have 2 minutes left for a final question.
Yeah, so as we talk about civic, I'm Dr. Beth Whitted, civic engagement, and we're talking about leadership and setting priorities, I think the expression is not for us, without us. What's being done to make sure that we include the community and their voices? Because I'm not hearing any of that. Thank you.
I'm not sure I understand the question, to be honest. Are you talking about in all venues? What do you
So
mean
as you start setting priorities,
Yeah.
are you getting the people in the community that live in these communities, their opinions about what should be done, solutions? And I have to say, when you said something about Cincinnati, talking about pissing people off, Cincinnati does an incredible job. It's part of their culture in Cincinnati. It's not here in Columbus. So I think we need to be very intentional, and I'm not away from my question. We have to be very intentional to make sure that we've included the community and asking them, does this make sense to you and your community?
Okay, now, thank you. Now, I understand what you're saying now. So I'm going to answer it from a Columbus standpoint for just a second, because I think we need to talk about Columbus. I don't necessarily disagree with that, actually, but I do think it depends on the subject, because there are specific things happening with certain topic areas right now that are deeply involving the community. I think there's others that probably are not. So I'm maybe would chat with you afterwards, because I'm curious what sectors in particular you're thinking about. I will say this, I'm going to go back to this Funding Review Advisory Committee for a second. We have an open forum coming up, October, Marshall, what's the date? October 7th. This is really important because what we've been doing up until this period is hearing from specific representatives of specific sectors who are coming in front of this group, and these are public meetings, televised, et cetera. But in order to allow an opportunity for anybody who wants to come and talk about what's happening in their particular sector, this open forum is available for anyone to come. So it may not be the answer to your specific question, but I want to put it out there because it's really important as we continue to hear from all these sectors and look to figure out what we are going to be able to do about it. We need to hear from as many people who are willing and able to come and speak. So that may be slightly different than where you were, the origin of your question, but I guess I'm using it as a catalyst to offer that is one opportunity to hear about a lot of broad needs in the community.
All right, and I think that we're unfortunately going to wrap up our conversation for today. We're going to invite Matt Barnes back to the podium, but thank you so much for all of your insights and perspective on civic engagement.
Can I say like 10 seconds?
10 seconds.
10 seconds. If you didn't understand, this is why it's critical that you vote. We're in this situation because a group outvoted another group, and now we're struggling through it. So just voting is critical in terms of civic engagement. If you can't do anything else, vote.
Yeah. It's the ultimate in civic engagement, it is. Once again, let's thank our panel real quick. I mean, I feel like this is the room that probably doesn't need to hear the most that civic engagement is important, but we need to amplify this to others who do think it's not, and making sure we make a difference out there, because frankly, it's the only way that's going to move this community forward and frankly this nation forward. And I think sometimes we all get clouded by the national discourse, but it is nice to know that we have a community and organization like CMC and others that are willing to make sure civic engagement is at the heart and soul of what this city is all about and to move this city forward. So thank you so much to everyone who helped make this conversation possible, including today's forum sponsor, Downtown Columbus Incorporated, the presenting sponsor of our live stream, the Center for Human Kindness at the Columbus Foundation, and our live stream partner, the Columbus Dispatch as well. And of course, thank you to the National Veterans Memorial and Museum for hosting us, and our appreciation to our speakers, Dr. Bertley, Megan Cummings, Sandy Doyle-Ahern, and our host, Sophia Pfiffner. One more round of applause for all of those who make this possible. And again, we do forums like this every Wednesday. Not at this time, though. We'll be at our regularly scheduled time at 11:30 for Money Movers, the bankers fueling Columbus's future. You talk about money? Well, there you go. Money makes the world go around, and we need more of it. But that's right here at the National Veterans Memorial and Museum again next Wednesday at 11:30. Thank you, everyone. We're here till 6 o'clock, so enjoy the conversation. Feel free to get a drink, get some food, and thank you just so much for being here on this special time. Again, bars open until 6 p.m., so have a great rest of your day and a great rest of your week as well.